For my group reflection, I attended 3 educational trainings. 2 were face to face, and 1 was via webinar. The first group I attended was on the effects of marijuana. The facilitator began the group by introducing herself and then going straight into her hour-long PowerPoint presentation. There was no interaction between the facilitator and the group. However, there was cohesion and interaction within the subgroups. The facilitator left a few minutes at the end of the presentation to answer questions. For me, the best part of the group was the pizzas that was served for lunch, as the group was held during lunchtime. My second group was on depression, and like the first, it was held during lunchtime. And since the facilitator was running late, we were allowed to eat first. Once the facilitator arrived and got her PowerPoint presentation set up, she began the group by introducing herself. After this, she conducted a round robin in which group members stated their names and occupation. Once that was completed, she led the group in an icebreaker. I feel the icebreaker built group cohesion. It allowed for a moment of group-centered interaction. Throughout the presentation, the facilitator made polls with group members, paraphrased for understanding, and often linked what group members had to say. The facilitator left time at the end for group members to ask questions and network with one another. My final group was a webinar. I was given a link that allowed me to access the group. When I logged in, I could hear others talking and other noises in the background, and there was a list of names for the people that had logged in, as well as a PowerPoint presentation. The group was on current opioid trends in the region where I live. Once the facilitator was ready to start the presentation, he asked everyone to mute their microphones and instructed us to type any questions in the box, and he would get to them as he came to them. There was no group cohesion. The facilitator spoke the entire time, and he did not acknowledge the group until the end, when he thanked us for attending. The one thing that all 3 sessions had in common was the request for feedback, whether it was the piece of paper that they gave us at the end of our face-to-face groups, asking about the facilitator and the information she gave, or if it was a survey that we had to complete after the webinar. Out of the 3 groups I attended, the second group was the example of how I would like for the groups that I facilitate to look. So, what would I do differently? Well, for the first group, I would focus on group dynamics and building cohesion by doing a round robin and an icebreaker. This would allow me to gauge my group members and see who knows what part of the information and who may be helpful to me during the presentation. I would have done more to interact with the group members throughout the presentation and allowed the group members to engage and interact with one another. That way we broke out of the subgroups that everyone was in, based on who they knew probably from work or who they knew because they had worked with them before in the community. For the second group, the only thing I can think of that I would have done differently is that if I knew I was running late, I would have called the host and asked her to set up the equipment. That way, the only thing I would have had to have done when I got there is upload the PowerPoint. For the webinar, I would have thanked everyone for joining it in the beginning and made some attempt to interact with the group, whether it was asking the group questions or asking them what their thoughts were and having them type the responses in the box and reading some of those out loud, or calling on certain people and having them unmute their microphone in order to give feedback throughout the presentation. It was interesting watching how each facilitator chose to facilitate their group. I was able to see what I would like for my groups to look like, when I facilitate them. And I was able to see just how easy it was for the second facilitator to establish group cohesion. This assignment allowed me to observe how group members may feel when attending a group that I may facilitate. So much like second the second lady who facilitated that group, I would like to have that confidence and be comfortable facilitating the group. I think that is what made that group better than the others that I attended.